baby. Well, thank you for getting to know each other a little bit better. Last week we've been digging into Luther's Small Catechism, and so talking about the 10 Commandments, and we've sort of covered the first 3. Who remembers the first one?
Oh.
Know the God before you.
Right. And the Lord your God, you shall have no other God before me. And Lutherans, following the older Catholic tradition, put under that also the no graven images, don't worship idols, right? Because an idol would be another god. So, right, remember there's different systems for numbering. It's all still in there. Don't panic about that. Second commandment.
How about a book?
Yeah, does anybody want a catechism?
I do.
When all else fails, ask for the book.
Thank you. Does anybody else? What?
Anybody want a small catechism? You've all memorized it. I'm guessing many of you actually have memorized it. You shall not make wrongful
Use of the name.
use of the name of the Lord your God. All formerly known as do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Right? Wrongful use of God's name. And last week I talked about how when I was growing up, that meant I was not allowed to say, oh my God, right? Like that, because that was wrongful use of God's name. Yes, and that's not the entirety of keeping that commandment. Luther describes it as using God's name to curse, swear, lie, or deceive. Right? So to say something is God's will when it is not God's will is making wrongful use of God's name. Right? We've talked about the theology of glory and a theology of the cross, and that theologians of the cross are not so interested in just appearances. They want to get to the substance of the matter, calling a thing what it is. Right? So we can keep that on one of those back burners as we get through the commandments. Okay, so I'm the Lord your God, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, or do not make wrongful use of God's name. Which is why also, to this day, many Jews will not say, that they won't say God's name. So when Moses, anybody remember Moses received God's name at the burning bush? Because there's a burning bush, and Moses is like, what's up? There's this bush, it is on fire, and yet it is not consumed. And he trucks over, and God's like, go, and Moses says, and who am I going to tell all these people is sending me? Does anybody remember the answer in English?
I am who I am.
I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. In English, when we transliterate it, we often end up, scholars have us saying Yahweh, right? Jews won't say God's name because they don't want to make wrongful use of it. God's name is holy. And so often they'll say Adonai, meaning the Lord. Sometimes you'll see in Jewish publications Hashem, which is the name. And one of my favorites, a rabbi friend of mine shares stuff with me sometimes, and sometimes God's name, just God, gets written like this. Which I always, the first time I see it, because that's not how I normally do it. And so I'm like, oh, right, okay. And like if you're going to come up with a creative alternative, I kind of love that.
Yeah. Right?
Like, God is big and holy, and I am neither of those things on my own. Right?
I think I'll also see an underscore in there.
Oh, yeah, like this.
Dash.
Or a dash, yeah.
Or
Yeah.
There's many different alternate sort of conventions, ways that people have come to do that, but it's all in an effort to honor the name of God and not misuse it. So it's pay attention to the language people use around you. It's not everybody has the second commandment in mind a lot of the time, right? Third commandment.
Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy.
Yeah, remember the Sabbath day, and not just remember it, but keep it holy. So I know we talked about the third commandment last week. I wanted to read a couple of bits because I'm always keep reading, and then I read things, I'm like, oh, I want to share that. Oh, I want to share that. I'm like, nobody wants a book report, Lindeen. But
Yes.
yes, nobody wants a book report. My family loves the Friends of the Bozeman Public Library book sales that happen a few times a year, when all of the books that have been donated to the library that the library does not immediately add to their collection, and most of the books that are donated, they don't add to their collection. They have a book sale, and then the money goes to the Friends of the Library, and then they buy the books they actually want for their collection, I'm assuming. But the last couple times we've gone on the Sunday of the book sale, which is the bag sale, where you just take a bag and you can fill a bag with books for $5. And I've been very fortunate the last couple times I went. Not this last time, but the time before, I'm pretty sure there was an Episcopal priest who retired and donated his or her library. And I ended up with more than one bag of books. But this last time we went, I picked up this one on the bag sale day by Stanley Hauerwas, whose tradition I'm not even sure of. Like, he's kind of all over the place. Ken, do you know?
What? No?
What?
He's Methodist. And
Hauerwas is Methodist?
Yeah, partially. But
he's kind of all over. And Will Willimon, who is Methodist, and was the chaplain at Duke University for a long time, and then a Methodist bishop. But they have this book called The Truth About God, the 10 Commandments in Christian Life. And at the first couple of commandments, they quote Luther all the time. And I'm like, go guys. And then they quote a whole bunch of other theologians as well. I wanted to share just a couple bits of their reflection. So it's not written exactly as a catechism. I mean, clearly it's longer than a small catechism. But in regards to the third commandment, they note that Americans are working more than ever, at least at the time they wrote this, and how easy it is to be occupied with things that aren't worship on a Sunday morning. And then they get into the biblical reflection, and they say this: Sabbath is a great gift of God to community. The Sabbath was made for humankind and not humankind for the Sabbath, said Jesus in Mark 2:27. The reason given for the Sabbath is that even God rested one day out of 7 after creation. Thus, Sabbath is the goal of creation. This means that keeping Sabbath is a matter for the whole world, not just Israel. So even animals and strangers are to enjoy it. Furthermore, Sabbath is tied to creation in that in resting, God signaled the goodness of divine creativity in the world, the finished quality of the world. When God paused to call creation good, God was enjoying his sovereignty. God was saying, I am God and I can create a world and its wonderful creatures without being diminished as God. Built right into the core of our lives is this gracious rhythm of work and rest, activity and reflection. So to keep Sabbath is to be in step with the way God intends the world to work. It is to participate in an act of recreation, in which we are put back in touch with the way in which God intends for life to be enjoyed. Sabbath is not the joy of not doing work. Rather, Sabbath is perfect work, the end of work, the end of it all. That Sabbath names the 7th day of creation is a reminder that the commandments are not just about quote-unquote morality, but involve claims about the way things are. To rightly know the truth about the world, we must worship God. And to be so formed is to understand why we must tell one another the truth. Not to speak truthfully is to fail to live according to our true nature, that is, creatures who have life as a gift from a gracious creator. Sabbath, so understood, is cosmic. I don't know. I was like, oh yeah, there you go. Like
I really like Willimon stuff.
It's big,
Yeah,
right? It's big. And I think often we don't think about it that way. We don't think about Sabbath being part of the rhythm of the nature of reality. Right? And then what a gift it is that God calls us to that, commands that.
Interesting that they refer to it as the end of our labor.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it's all been done.
Yeah.
The work has been done. You know.
So the seventh day is rest. Yeah, Grant?
If one of our core values is creation care, how might practicing Sabbath reflect upon
Yeah,
care
for
creation?
sure. That's a really good question. I mean, that's something for us to think about and try to find ways to articulate and. Yep. Yeah, and then later on they quote Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was a Jewish rabbi and scholar and prolific author, and we have some Heschel in our church library too. I commend him to you also.
So I think also in terms of today, it's our cleanup day.
Yeah.
And the trim the shrubs and the trees.
Yep.
Which I'm actually kind of looking forward to in a weird way. But I think that is also like the keeping it holy part, right? Because we're taking care of our place. And it's not working on Sabbath, but it is working on Sabbath.
To the glory of God.
But I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
it's
and there
on
would
the-
be
it's in
there would
the-
probably
it's
be
in the
some
good
communities
checkbox.
that are stricter than we are about that would say no, we shouldn't be doing the weed whacking on a Sunday.
But I think it ties into what you were just reading, in that it's actually part of the deal, part of the what?
Service.
Yeah, the service. It's a good thing. I'm saying.
Yeah, I think you kind of, and I entered into sort of a tension between the formality or the letter of the law and the fact that we've entered into the Sabbath rest in Christ, who's in the Hebrews. And so that every day, and this hit me personally in college many years ago, when I got interested in a young lady at a camp down in Mount Hermon, and we were writing, and then all of a sudden she became Seventh-day Adventist, and then I was out, the picture. So they were, of course, very wooden in terms, and I keep saying, no, we have entered the Sabbath rest. Saturday is our Sabbath. You know, the Sabbath is on Saturday, not Sunday. So how did, and that's their argument, and then you, and so I just said, no, Monday is our Sabbath too, and Tuesday's our Sabbath. And then we present our bodies as living sacrifices, which is our spiritual worship. I love that whole translation of worship. And that's, we can trim shrubs, and we can trim trees, and we can garden, and we can do work, secular work, and still be in the Sabbath rest as we do that. It's kind of a leveler for me. It makes it holistic in terms of how I look at Wednesday or Thursday.
Well, I mean, it certainly doesn't mean we're supposed to sit there and just watch the TV on Sunday,
Right.
all day.
So
Right.
what you're saying, it's metaphoric, and so if you take like an ecumenical view, you take like a Zen, they'll have versus play. They'll have, in a certain playground, it's called every day's a holiday.
That's complicated.
Yeah. No, but no. It's a way of looking at life. It's taking the Sabbath every day.
LL flew yesterday for the first time in 40 years.
Say it again.
LL, the Israeli airline,
Yeah.
because they were bringing reservists back to fight. And so even the Jewish tradition has certain times where the Sabbath, you can work on the Sabbath because for the greater good of the community.
Yeah, Annie.
Yeah, I think that that's an interesting entry point into discussing the Sabbath. Because I think what do we rest? What is the purpose of rest? It has to energize us for the coming week often. And so for me anyway, something like service actually can be very energizing. It puts you into a different place than your normal day to day. So whether it's an active rest or a passive rest, something like being part of your community and doing an active service, I think can be quite restful, and that's rejuvenating. And it does something different and set apart from what your rest would be like.
Or you touched on it in the last Sunday's sermon. to stop and realize what I have is not something that I did. It comes from a power greater than I. And that would be shorthand for the Sabbath.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think sometimes if we get caught up in the letter of the, like I say, the Sabbath is on Saturday, and we are calling Sunday the Sabbath, right? And which I have no problem with either direction, obviously. But I also know that there are times when I can show up on a Sunday morning and not be worshipful, and not be really maybe caught up in my own something is going on in my life, or I'm distracted by stuff. I'm not focused on who God is and what God has done. And I think the Ten Commandments first kind of indicates that probably we ought to be focused when we walk through these doors. It's good for us to be in prayer and to be present with God. So it's by the letter we're there, even if we're not really there. You know, so it's all those little tensions that we kind of move into, but it comes down to, I think, first commandments. You know, let God be God and know He's God.
Yeah. Jean, you were gonna.
Well, last year the Gather group studied the Ten Commandments, and the person who led that had the African American interpretation of the Ten Commandments. And the third one, they said, African Americans said, and I don't know when this was written, but they said this was the first Fair Labor Practices Law. We're allowed a day off.
Yep.
Even as slaves, we're allowed a day off. Wonderful.
Right.
And instead we say, oh, I'd rather go play than sit in a building. So a very different way to look at it.
Yeah, well, and to think, you know, the context in which the Ten Commandments were originally given, they had just escaped from slavery in Egypt. When Pharaoh was not down with a day off, you know. So here they are, you get a day off, O people of God. Oh, but also so do your animals, and so do your slaves, and so does everybody, because it's part of the rhythm of creation. Walter Brueggemann, who is a UCC, United Church of Christ professor emeritus now, I guess, but also a prolific writer, has written some really interesting things about the Ten Commandments, and especially about the third commandment, and then the need that even contemporary, especially first world folks have to remember that that sort of the military, industrial, whatever system is not the end-all be-all goal of everything. Right? That production, for the sake of production, consequences be damned, that's not what God calls us. That's not all God calls us to, right? And so that there's more and there's other than just accumulation of wealth, and that Sabbath command is one way to get at that a little bit, that to remember that we, in the end, cannot sustain ourselves. We cannot do everything for ourselves, that we need God, and Sabbath helps us remember that. Yeah. Some great Brueggemann in the church library also. So I commend that to you. All right, so those are commandments. I mean, all of the commandments are about our relationship with God, right? Those three are very obviously about our relationship with God. They're also about our relationships with each other. But then we move to the fourth commandment. Anybody remember what it is? Honor your father and your mother. Who wants to open up Exodus 20 and read it for us in Exodus?
I have it.
Great.
Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the small catechism, Luther just puts in the first part, honor your father and your mother. In Exodus, it includes a promise, right? There's a so that in there, which is interesting. So Luther's answer to his perennial question, what does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we neither despise nor anger our parents and others in authority, but instead honor, serve, obey, love, and respect them. Right? I confessed last week that when I was visiting my parents, the week prior, I did not successfully honor my father and mother the whole time because my dad was making me insane and being completely unreasonable. Yeah. When you hear this, we are to fear and love God so that we neither despise nor anger our parents and others in authority. Who else do you put in that category? Ben points at Dan.
Your spouse.
Spouses. Maybe.
Darn it.
Religious leaders?
Religious leaders.
Employers.
Say it again.
Employers.
Employers.
What you guys gonna say, bosses?
Teachers,
Teachers.
principals,
Principal.
Political authorities.
Political authorities. Government.
elders in the community,
Elders in the community.
Police officers?
Sometimes doctors.
Police officers. Doctors. Shirley, you're about to say something.
Aren't we all in some sort of authority of something?
Maybe I would argue that Britt is not.
No.
Oh, we did-
I don't know, actually.
Little finger wrapped.
do peers fit into that?
I don't know. Do they? I'm
Peers?
asking.
Yeah.
What do you think?
yeah, I would say a trusted friend,
Yeah.
somebody who knows us authentically and can tell us the truth when we choose not to listen to them.
Which might not be a peer, actually. That might be a close friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there people whose authority we are under that we may not choose?
Yeah. Just a little.
Parents.
Huh?
Abusive parents.
Abusive parents. Yeah. Abusive any of those things. Right? Authority can be misused.
All the time.
Absolutely.
So at what level can we disobey this commandment?
Right. So then that becomes, this is where the rubber hits the road. Right? In all the years I have taught confirmation to middle school and junior high students, I mean, they are not stupid. They are more astute than we give them credit for a lot of the time. And this is this is a commandment, they push back on all the commandments. What about? And again, it's sometimes helping them move beyond the letter of the law to the spirit of the law. Well, does that mean I can't play a soccer game on Sunday? Does that mean I can't do laundry on Sunday? Talking about Sabbath. But honor your father and your mother. What if your parents are abusive? Okay, then what does honoring abusive parents look like? What does honoring oppressive regimes look like? If you understand yourself to be under their authority. What does that look like? Not a rhetorical question.
Tension.
Say it again?
Tension.
Tension.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus, with the taxes,
Yep.
remember? He said, render to Caesar the things.
Yeah, that's next Sunday's reading.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's, so you're, not that Herod was Herod wasn't for Jesus. Rome wasn't for Jesus, but Jesus did do the things that were in keeping with the Father's will. I think there's a reason that this is beneath the opening commandments.
Sure.
So you had Daniel, the same tension of working with, the king, and yet.
Right, Daniel would not bow down to the giant, if you remember the VeggieTales version, the giant
And then
bunny.
he was praying every day when they made the rule to trap him, and throw him to the lion's den, and that was against the decree.
Yeah.
Daniel was remember the Lord.
Yeah, he was keeping the first commandment, and in doing that,
Yeah.
did not honor the.
So the price sometimes.
Yeah, there's a consequence sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
voice the mother and father part. They need to honor their children as well. If the children are
like in Ephesians, like, you know, parents do not, or children honor your father and mother, and parents don't grieve your children.
well, yeah, but you know, if your children are adults and they're caring or trying to care for you, I think the parents need to try to respect that also and make it easier for them and respect that.
Daniel addresses how you address. He's translating dreams, and their messages that powers don't want to hear. And the two words that he speaks are wisdom and tact. So how do you deal with an abusive boss with wisdom and tact? How do you deal with an abusive parent with wisdom and tact? There's a point where a child's incapable of doing it, so another adult has to step in.
A lot of variables in that one.
It's not always as simple,
That's, yeah.
because where the rubber hits the road, it's real life. Yeah.
I think this to me, as I read it, I think that we primarily say this is talking of the family structure kind of a thing, and it's the foundational part of then moving on to how we relate to other people in authority. As a child, if I learned how to respect my parents, my father, there were things that he did that I wouldn't go along with, but I still respected him. And when he asked me to do things, well, he was a little more firm, not often, but when he got upset, and the times I can remember, rightly so, I remember as a smart-aleck junior high school kid and saying something back to my father, which was not a wise idea, and he had just come home from work. He was a mechanic, steel-toed shoes, and he hauled off. I would not recommend this in any child discipline thing, but he just kicked me in the backside and literally lifted me off the floor, and came down, and I went, I deserve that. And I'm not going to test him anymore. I'm done with that. I'm going to learn how to. So it was probably a negative way to approach discipline, but somehow it broke through my pretty substantial smart-alecky response.
Right, like when my dad told me not to be smartass, and I asked him if he'd rather I be a dumbass. Yeah, that doesn't go over very well.
But that's a good one.
Did you say that?
Do you want me to be a dumbass?
But that's foundational then as you look at governing authorities. How do you deal with some of the situations that are created by people we elect or we don't elect? Well, we elect if we're looking at us as a unity. How do you deal with that and do it in a way that is respectful in one sense? That they wouldn't receive it that way necessarily.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the Luther lumping in other authorities in addition to parents, and Luther, I think Luther was right on a lot of theological stuff, but in practice, like, he was not always helpful when it came to, like, peasants rising up against, well, not just papal, but like nobility and, you know, who gets to decide how people should live. And but I think the goal, Luther's goal here is saying just as that our relationship with God, which the first 3 commandments show us, should be characterized by respect and love. And when Luther says fear, he doesn't mean like cowering in the corner fear. It's like awe. Like, remember that God is God and you are not. is that fear piece. That respect and love for God should lead to relationships with others that are also characterized by respect and love. And support, just like God loves and supports us, so also people that are put in positions of authority should also love and support us. So then it's where it gets hard is when people in the positions of authority aren't doing what they're meant to do. Yeah. All right, 5th commandment. You shall not murder. Sometimes translated, you shall not kill. We'll dig into it next week because I got to go finish getting ready for worship, and that clock is slow according to my watch. The most contemporary translation of Luther's Small Catechism, you shall not murder. What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we neither endanger nor harm the lives of our neighbors, but instead help and support them in all of life's needs. So there's always the prohibition, and then and here's what we should do. So think about that this week. How is it that we help and support our neighbors in all of life's needs? That's a big thing. To be continued.
Yeah. Yeah, boy.
Sorry, I didn't make you open. I guess I did make you open your Bibles a little bit. Not enough. More next week.
Oh, sorry.
Go get ready for worship.